105.5 WDHA here on the Jersey Magazine. August marks a special month for fans of rock music, and this year is no exception. It is the 53rd anniversary of the event of Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld inviting, half a million or so of their closest friends to a spot in upstate New York for what became known as the Woodstock Music and Art Festival. And I have with me this morning Neal Hatch. He is the curator at the museum at Bethel Woods. Neal, good morning and welcome.
Hey, good morning. Thank you.
What's involved in curating the museum?
That's a lot of listening to music. A lot actually. Curating a museum, I mean, one is it's a fun job. I'm not gonna lie. This is a great job. It's fantastic. Every day I read about Woodstock, right? Every day I read about the bands associated with Woodstock. Every day I listen to bands that really owe their careers, or let's say their the precedent of music from the 60s, how it moved through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even in today. So we do a lot here with trying to tie that history to things happening today. I attend the Coachella Music Festival. I've done that for several years. And, one of the things when you're there, I think everything you're looking at is a result of what happened at Woodstock. Woodstock was really the first modern music festival that set the precedent for what a music festival could be. And that is what music festivals become. So we just kind of get to do cool stuff.
There were a number of festivals that actually took place in 1969 within a few weeks on either side of Woodstock. None of them, though, had quite the panache, if you will. There was one in Denver, Atlantic City, which had all of them had great bands. Led Zeppelin was on the bill of a couple of them. Creedence Clearwater, who played, of course, at Woodstock on a few of them. Laurel, Maryland had one. Washington, Seattle. Aside from the huge crowd, though, what was it in your mind that made Woodstock stand out?
There were over 45 festivals in 1969. Like the bands that play Woodstock are touring through other festivals. What made Woodstock really unique is, a lot of, we talk about, it was an accident. No one knew how many people were coming. It was a disaster. But in fact, it was 9 months of planning for something that would be very different. It was one of the first festivals that really tried to create a holistic environment where you would see music in a rural, not just a rural setting, but at a site that had been very carefully manicured and landscaped in order to give you an experience of seeing art and music like side by side. It is a music and art festival. Art was as important at this festival as the music. What happens though is, had 100,000 people come, like was the plan. I think they would have, after the festival, talked about how cool it was to have music and art and, everything there. They just got overwhelmed by the 450,000 people that came. That became the story. Hippies mired in mud became the story, not music and art festival. Right now in the exhibit, or in our special exhibit this year, the whole exhibit is on the art components of the festival. This is all based on brand new research, and really some of that research coming out of very new oral histories that we've done. We did an oral history with an artist that won second place at the Woodstock Art Contest. We did an oral history with the family of the artist that won first place. Now, no one really even knows, well, we didn't know there's an art contest, let alone that like the people that won first and second place still had stories, still have their paintings. So we have some of that on display, and really are trying, we call those like almost the lost histories. We're trying to put that together. So you would ask, I tell you, what made Woodstock so unique was this environment that was created in order to see the music. And it was the first festival, one of the first festivals, if not the first festival, that had overnight camping on the site. It wasn't a racetrack where you came on Friday, went home, came on Saturday and went home. And because it was an on-site thing, pretty rural, that it just drew thousands of people because it was new, but also it was a happening, right? You're going to go sleep where you hear music. That's a thing. And it really wasn't something that was happening before. So that by far was the most innovative thing that Woodstock Ventures really developed.
Neal Hatch is my guest this morning on the Jersey Magazine here at 105.5 WDHA, curator at the museum at Bethel Woods. And of course, Bethel Woods was the site of the original Woodstock back in 1969. Just a few years ago, there were archaeologists who were digging around the original site. Now, when you think of archaeology, I don't know about you, but I think of the pyramids and things like that. And they're digging up and they're finding pop tops to soda cans. What were some of the other cool things that they found then, Neal?
We in 2017, the historic site became a historic site. We were listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And, with the management of a historic site, much like a battlefield or the pyramids or anything that's, really, really old, you have management plans and then a process. So archaeology is one of the tools that's used on this site to document things. Now, I will tell you that you're right about pop tabs. We find when we do archaeology projects here, what we find are pop tabs, and that's almost all we find. What we find is really the trash left over from people throwing their trash on the ground. And but what that allows us to do is map in areas where people were. And so the importance of archaeology isn't necessarily finding an artifact. We certainly are. It's nothing like King Tut's tomb at all. In fact, it's typically very rusted beer cans. But that pinpoints places where people were camping, or pinpoints places, in the case what you're talking about, is that archaeology was done looking for post holes from the stage to positively identify where the stage was. And those were found. It was the post holes that were found associated with the fence in front of the stage that were really significant. And that gave a corner of the stage, which allowed then kind of the stage area to be mapped out, let's say. And then that allows us to manage that area in it with historic preservation process, where we don't dig there, we don't trench it for electrical service or whatever, right? You have set that side or that area aside as kind of a let's say a sacred space, right? Where we just say, well, we're going to leave it like that. We don't do the kind of archaeology where you would be digging everything around the pyramid to recreate it or something. Like we really just want to verify where sites are, so we avoid them.
You mentioned the stage, and every so often you'll see something online about original piece of stage found from Woodstock. How much of that stage still exists, if any?
Several years ago, a guy had a memory as he was here at the festival as a high school student, and he had a memory of being at a bungalow colony that his girlfriend's father owned, and his girlfriend's father had him come over to unload plywood off of a truck. And his father said, "Oh, I just bought this plywood from the stage from the Woodstock Festival, and I'm gonna build a handball cart out of it," and which he did. And so Steve Gold, several years later, remembered that, went to this place that he remembered it being, found the handball court in the middle of the woods, had worked with the property owners to buy it. And when they took it apart, they were able to verify from the movie and from photographs that in fact it was the stage. The smoking gun of that, or the real thing, is you can see pieces of the stage during Woodstock that had been painted, and they found the pieces of plywood in this they took down the board, and on the back of them, they found the painted pieces. And then they worked with the company that manufactured it, that is still, manufacturing plywood,
Mhm.
to do some material testing to verify that this is the material that they were doing. It's actually pretty cool. So they have a business called Piece of the Stage, and they sell various items with small pieces of the stage. And I think they're um, it's kind of cool to me, just because this could have been something lost forever. Could have been just something just rotted away to nothingness, except for a memory that some guy has 50 years later that he wakes up with one day and says, I wonder if that stage is still out there. So it's pretty cool. We work with Steve Gold on several projects here. Last year, he donated 2 full-size sheets of plywood from the stage to us. We have that on exhibit under right now. We have an original Bill Hanley Woodstock bass bin, which are the speakers created for Woodstock. We have that sitting on these 2 pieces of plywood. It's kind of cool.
Neal Hatch, my guest here on the Jersey Magazine this morning at 105.5 WDHA. This month being the 53rd anniversary of the original Woodstock Festival in 1969. You mentioned earlier in the interview how the story of the festival became hippies covered in mud, and it brought to my mind a memory that I have. I was too young to go. There was no way that my parents were going to let little Jimmy Monahan trudge off to Woodstock with or without any friends or older cousins or what have you. My grandparents lived in a town in the Poconos near Lake Wallenpaupack that was roughly an hour away from where the festival was. So a lot of the kids, rather than try to backtrack to the thruway, which was still a mess, there's cars all over the place, rather than that, they came down New York into the Pocono region of Pennsylvania and ended up in my grandparents' town. And all I heard about, because I remember going up in like end of August or September of 1969, all I heard about were all these hippies covered in mud from my older cousins. That was their connection to the Woodstock Festival, Neal.
Well, that's pretty. Everyone has a Woodstock story, right? Everyone has a Woodstock story. When it's one of the things we ask right here about when we interact with people that come to the site, even young people. I was with I was doing a tour of college students, and they were local college students, and we were out on the site, and one of them, she's not telling me, she's telling her friends, which was interesting to me. And she says, oh, my uncle was here, and he lost his car, and he didn't come home until 3 days after the festival. And so that was funny, because in their family life, they have this Woodstock story that evidently is talked about so much in their house that she's relaying that story to her friends on the Woodstock field.
What's your favorite part of the museum, Neal?
Well, I'll tell you what, the special exhibit is very cool because that's based on new research, and every year it changes. So that's that's really the work we do at the museum. So we have 5 staff here, and a lot of our work that we do day to day is based on research. This is the most documented festival in the history of festivals, but there's still a lot we don't know. And almost every day, we get a new picture, we get something that then is a piece of the puzzle. And what we're allowed to do in that special exhibit is put the puzzles together. Though in our main exhibit, we have a 9-minute multimedia experience. It's like a round room with multiple cameras and videos. And in 9 minutes, you get about 10 seconds of almost everyone that played on the stage. And that is one of the best exhibits I've ever seen in a museum. But I think that's the best thing here, because you can walk in that room, you are surrounded by images of the festival. And I feel like in that 9-minute time, you can get an idea of what the festival really was about. And that's an award-winning exhibit here that's really outstanding.
The site of the museum is not that far from WDHA territory here in northern New Jersey, and I know a lot of our listeners go up there on a fairly regular basis. If you want to learn more, the website is Bethel Woods BethelWoodsCenter.org. That's BethelWoodsCenter.org. Neal Hatch, curator at the museum at Bethel Woods. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I've enjoyed talking with you about the festival with the hippies in the mud.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you very much for talking to me.